also, if you're not interested, come say hello to me afterwards as well. And with that, take it over.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, welcome everyone. Glad to see the room fill up here. So, but apparently there's a recording, so we want to make sure we get it all on audio here. So, we'll introduce ourselves here in a second, but in essence, I'll hit the topic that we're going to hit here. So, we'll talk a lot tonight about creating a modern culture of data. Honestly, it's been something that's been talked about. If you've been to any conferences recently, the entire Tableau conference for an entire week was talking all about building data culture. A lot of people are talking about now is the time to create one of these, and how do you do it? And what we've helped put together, Mike and myself, as well as a big team outside of the two of us, have created kind of some thought leadership on what we think it takes, what are kind of the elements, what are the steps that it takes to truly create and change kind of how a company would approach data. It's not just a technology play, it's not just a people play, it's this beautiful harmony between both. So we'll walk through kind of our steps. Obviously, we'll take questions as you have them. We leave a lot of time at the end for Q&A, and then we can hang around as long as we want. So please ask questions as you have them, or go ahead and hold to the whatever's easiest. Without that, we will jump to things here. Jump to the next slide. Back over. There we go. So, my name is Kevin Chaplin. So I'm the Director of Data and Analytics at Slalom. We are a local consulting firm with a global reach. So we actually have about 800 members here out of Chicago, 125 of which are all centered around data and analytics. Myself, I've been attached to a bunch of different things, but the one closest to Chicago here, so I actually started the North Chicago Tableau user group. For those of you in the suburbs, I did create it for you. I myself live out in the burbs, so I was happy to find a user group that was a little bit closer to home, and also was lucky enough to be selected to speak at the Tableau conference a couple of years back. So speaking about something similar, another thing Mike and I created, which was called Navigator, which is all about scaling Tableau to the enterprise, making sure that it's a tool that's not used in pockets, but instead a tool that is used kind of as the enterprise tool that can be scaled holistically. So here I say, believe that data is powerful, that every person can build a tool and knowledge can build it.
Thanks, Kevin. Mike Lewis, principal consultant, also with Slalom here in Chicago. As Kevin already mentioned, Seattle-based global footprint. But Chicago is our second office that was founded, and either first or second biggest office. So it's definitely a huge and important market for us here in Chicago. I'm in what's called our business advisory services practice. I specialize in organizational effectiveness and people transformation. So I'm kind of the yin to Kevin's yang, if you want to think about it that way, in terms of data analytics versus the more people orientation side. So my passion is more around people transformation, using levers of data and technology to achieve that. So it's a really cool intersection, because as Kevin's put it in, as you'll hear more about shortly, you can have the great data. You can have clean quality information and data. You have the best systems, you have the best platforms. If you don't have the people that know how to use it, if they're not data literate, if they don't know when to use what and for what purposes, you're probably not going to get very far, or you're going to be using the wrong tool in the wrong place. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we progress, but that's really where my passion comes in, is helping organizations and people understand how they can best achieve them. So we're really happy to be here and to be speaking with you all, and really want to make this as interactive as possible. We will have a couple of kind of polling questions along the way that we want to ask you, but again, raise your hand, feel free along the way.
So overall agenda, what we're trying to get across, benefits of data culture. Why do we think this is so important? Why is this such a big advancement from where companies were in the past 10 years, 20 years before this? We highlight a couple customers, not just of ours, which we tried to grab kind of more public ones, of companies that have done, honestly, kind of major shifts or found very strategic intersections of how to utilize data, either to monetize it or just to bring it in a different way, thinking about things a little bit differently. And we'll then dig into kind of our process for how we walk through it, kind of 5 core steps that we recommend, each with a whole slew of sub-steps underneath them, and then some asks that we've actually seen recently from our Chicago clients. So trying to understand, like, who is it that's actually helping to disrupt the data culture within maybe your organization. So who is it that you want to talk to if this is something that you're passionate about? Who is it within the organization that might be spurring one of these efforts?
So we'll set the stage a little bit here for you, and pull a couple of stats just for this. Data is changing the way that we do everything. Just think of from a pure amount of data that is coming in. Every second of every day, enough data is created to fill 50 Libraries of Congress. Okay, that sounds nice. What's in Library of Congress? I don't know. Great, a lot of stuff. But put it this way: 90% of the data ever created by humanity was produced in the last 2 years. Just think about that for a second. So all of humanity, that we have a recorded history, last 2 years, we are now seeing the equal of all of that. What do you do with all that? Where do you even begin to parse that and figure out what you're going to use that for? How do you find what is the useful data? How do you get your organization to understand what those parts are and focus on them? Because otherwise you're going to get lost in the flood of it. And trying to figure out where the important parts are is a part of this equation. So with that in mind, how do you get your organization, or those that you're working with, for that environment of experimentation, curiosity, of wanting to understand and look through whether it's the data exhaust or whether it's the kind of the primary sets of master customer data, for example, that you might have, and the parts in between, making those connects together, and having that, encouraging that culture of creativity, so that you can go explore those things, so you can try to make those connections. So that, in a heartbeat, is how we define a modern culture of data. It is that experimentation, that empowerment, that curiosity. So in order to do this, though, you got to think about how that there's shifts in working, ways of working. We especially run into a large amount of enterprises that tend to be probably a little bit more on the siloed, intuitive, and risk-averse side. Siloed can be as simple as think about IT or data side of the business versus the business side. Do they talk? Do they know their counterpart? Do they understand what each other does? Does the IT or data side understand how the business makes money? Does the business side understand what's possible, what's capable, what you can get out of the data? Or do they just have, maybe somebody's really good at Excel, they kind of find some stuff and get some information for them, and they kind of have their shadow analyst, basically, because we run into that a lot as well. So how do you break down those barriers and get that collaboration? How do you find those use cases that are positive, that are going to be a win for the organization? Intuitive. Think about what people think from the gut. They're going from their own experience. We have some examples where, with, for example, liquor organization, liquor company was looking at how they were doing their marketing and their marketing spend. And traditionally, for some marketers at least, it's a little bit from the gut. We've always done it this way. We see the results of putting our marketing dollars across, say, the span. What if they can think about that in a smarter way, a better way? What if they can make those connections between if we spend $1 in January versus we spend $1 in November, and where's that dollar going to get us? Well, you can find out a lot with that. And what you can find, and what we found, is that in some cases, depending on the product, depending on what the niche is for that particular liquor, is that dollar spent in November or December goes a heck of a lot further than that one. But if you're going from gut, you're not going to know that, because you're just going to go from what you've been doing and what's kind of been tried and true. Use data for that, though, all of a sudden, you get a little bit smarter about how you might want to invest those dollars. From risk-averse to experimental. If we think about organizations where people keep their heads down because that's how they get their job done and they just kind of go about doing their business, how do you foster that curiosity and that experimentation so that folks can, let's not call it failing fast, but how do you find those opportunities for them to have those little sandbox experiments and say, what if? How do you give them the time to do that? How do you encourage that and reward that curiosity? So those are some of the areas where we think of how an organization needs to shift in how they work. Kevin and I, before this, we were thinking about, are there businesses that don't need to be thinking about this? Are there, say, for example, examples of companies that might be more so relationship driven that the data side maybe is not as important or is less weighted? We pretty quickly came to the conclusion based on a handful of other professional services firms that we work with that, while it may be relationship driven, that's how they kind of get their business and retain the business and grow their business. We were able to, in about 10 minutes, come up with a couple of different examples of how they could monetize against that data, how they could get smarter and more efficient about those relationships, how they could start to, again, be more efficient and find those better ways to foster and grow those relationships. If there's anything you want to add, Kevin, in terms of how we were kind of spitballing on some of those examples.
No, it's just intriguing, and I think you hit both of them, right? It's either you're utilizing data in one of two ways. You're utilizing it to make yourself better, make yourself smarter, make yourself better decisions. And then you also, there's always interesting ways of how you can actually flip it and monetize the data. Can you flip open, right? We actually have an asset here that no one else has access to. How do we actually take that to market, and how do we go ahead and turn that into a profit? Companies, as you had talked about, even relationship type companies, are able then to, they're just sometimes in the right place where they actually have a lot of information coming in. We have a couple examples, a few slides up, so I won't ruin them, but in ways that a very traditional company has utilized data in different ways. So just a little bit to kind of get your minds going to say, oh, I never even thought a real estate company could bring that to life, or a table that's more just a point of sale system for restaurants would be able to really open up and monetize data in that way either. So we'll get to that, but very cool. Jump to the next one.
Okay.
All right, so we want to pause you for a second. So I feel like we've laid out a little bit what a modern culture of data means, what data culture can create. So I guess polling the audience a little bit, what do you think a successful shift in that can be? So instead of people being heads down, thinking that IT is going to serve reports for them, thinking IT is going to do the analysis, you're out there, you're in the business, and you're actually able to kind of query your own data source. You're able to understand you understand SQL enough. You can use Tableau. You can pull things like Alteryx together. You can blend your own data. You can do your own analysis. What's the power of that? What kind of things do you think that could actually bring to life?
The customer.
Free up resources for other projects?
Yeah, free up resources, correct. So that the IT can kind of do what IT does best. Business can do what they do best. Right?
I was just saying, I would think it would drive your insights into your customer,
Better insist.
because there's usually a distance between operations and the customer.
Correct.
Yeah.
So instead of having someone almost in the back office trying to think that they understand the business
Yeah.
model, it's almost let the analysis happen right next to where the
Yeah.
innovation happens. That's very smart, yeah. Anyone else? We got 8 bullets, so there's still 6 more. I'll jump ahead. All right, so we mentioned the customer. So it's being able to truly kind of, we mentioned innovation. Well, the next 2 slides are going to hit a lot on innovation here. But truly trying to disrupt. So this is something, right? It continues to push forward. It continues. But you'll see the companies that kind of die out are the ones who are trying to kind of hold on to what they have. You need to continue to innovate. Data is right now why everyone's here, right? Data is the disruptor that is being had. Customer 360, so truly being able to understand the full customer. This is saying I understand not just when I interacted with them, I understand what they're interested in, I understand across my various departments how my company 100% interacts with them. And that one single customer is not stored in as 3 different records with multiple keys and multiple IDs, so that you also don't annoy your customers with hitting them from multiple angles with multiple different kind of notifications and emails. Opportunities to ask questions, experiment, and uncover the unexpected. So this again, you're doing your analysis, you're actually finding something in the data, you're doing some data discovery, and you're in there saying, I had no idea that I should not be promoting this brand of liquor from January through October. I'm actually wasting my money. It doesn't help at all. It doesn't even produce a little bit of lift. It actually didn't help. They're wasting money, and therefore you should double down and go everything November, December, and help to really scale from there. Inspiring your people. There's a lot just in pure employee satisfaction and empowering and letting people truly do kind of what their passion is. A lot of times, otherwise, if you shut it down, job satisfaction is going to go with it. And so by truly allowing people to kind of follow their passion and allowing them to dig deep where they're at in their business, it allows them to go from there. Scale, efficiency, growth, right? Just many ways that data can play a really good role, and it's about putting data into the hands of the people who need it most. So we'll jump ahead here. So this one, these are all Chicago clients. You can try to guess them. But this one was really cool. So this is a real estate investment trust. So it's actually a company here who owns various malls. And in the traditional sense, what do they care about? They care about keeping their properties leased, right? So inside of a mall, they want to make sure that stores are leased as much as possible. So you want all the uptime because that's when rent's coming in. Outside of that, you're looking for obviously rents to be as high as possible for what you can charge. Simple things like that. So with data, you can do analysis. You can see, right, whose lease is coming up. You can start to see how much are you charging. Are you slowly increasing your dollar per square foot? Are you slowly gaining more and more? But that's kind of simplistic, backwards analysis. So what they actually found is instead of purely just being, hey, we can take our own data and we can do something, great with it to understand how to run our business, they actually flipped it and said, what if we could actually provide value back to the retailer? So we had done some proof of concept testing. Is also in addition to a lot of data that they had, but you can actually, as someone walks in, if they're using the mall Wi-Fi, now I can figure out which access point they connected to. I can figure out which door they came in. I can figure out how much time they spent at a mall. I can figure out if they browse, do they come back often, do they come back every 2 days, they come back every 4 days, spend a lot of time at Starbucks. When, in addition to that, now I understand mall frequency, number of stores. You can start to figure out where are the heavy parking spots, where do you need to double down, where do you need to expand. But a lot of this then actually feeds back to the retailers, and now they're actually able to go back to the retailers and provide. It wasn't a monetized way, but it was to go back and say, hey, as you're opening up, I don't know, the new Kohl's, right? Are you going to go to their mall, or are you going to go to the mall down the street? This mall now comes with additional insights and data and analytics attached to it. So now, basically, for the exact same price for the same features, they now have increased their service level, and they're trying to attract retailers to stay with them.
So,
Gather that data based on Wi-Fi.
That was more of a proof of concept. That's not eventually where they landed it, but yeah, that was something we actually tested it in our office to make sure it would work. But that is one thing that you can do purely just from 4 people that would connect to the Wi-Fi. You'd be able to catch MAC address and kind of frequency based.
So it was successful in our POC.
In the POC, it was, yeah.
Why didn't it go forward?
They went a different route. So
Oh, okay.
we do POCs just to kind of test out different things. They found value more so into. Sorry, I'm mixing up a couple of stories. We had done a POC around beaconing actually, which is Bluetooth beaconing, which is a lot more small scale in that, so you can actually tell which way someone's facing, how fast they're walking. All of those is what we were trying to pitch. Sorry, they actually fell on Wi-Fi, so they did go their route. So they utilized the Wi-Fi access points to determine, because what they really wanted was more just high level counts. They didn't care as much to figure out where somebody was going. Like they just said at high level, as long as I know kind of general location where they are, they're happy.
for you, so on the people side, does that mean that I'm trying to manage the environment, that we train the distribution for the mall, which is brokers bringing in the retailers, to sell that feature service level upgrade?
That would be part of it, yeah. So
Okay.
it's part of it would be part of the value add for the brokers who are just kind of selling that space.
Right.
Yes. The other part where you see that would be the mall operators, those that are on site, kind of logistics and ops of the mall itself.
Okay.
So, for example, think peak holiday season, you start to see issues with parking availability. Well, you're not going to be able to build out the parking lot, but you can at least try to adjust some ways for those mall operators being able
To keep the customers happy.
Exactly.
To retention, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so being able to kind of do a little bit of potentially modeling with that, being able to say based on kind of where things are and be a little bit anticipatory. So yes, so that's where when you encourage the right behaviors with that and them actually paying attention to that information, and yes, there's goodness that you can get from that, and carving out the time and priority for them to be able to do that, not just make sure that all the other things are taken care of, then yes, that's where you can get that complete picture. Yes, those are 2 of the user sets for that.
Got it. Thank you.
Demographical data to look at the demographics of the customers in the mall and see exactly combined with the building.
So it's an intriguing view, and a lot of it. I love the angle. A lot of times the data sets you have is valuable. The data set that you have combined with one other data source is usually exponentially more useful. So if you could combine it to demographic data, in this case, everyone's anonymous. You don't really know who anyone is. So unless you'd be able to go to the only time that you actually know who the customer is when they actually make a transaction, they have a credit card. That themselves is actually at the retailer, not at the mall level, so they wouldn't be able to get to that level of information. But there are plenty of places that you eventually get to that.
You can
Not as
do
much
like
in
the
the store.
second level data.
Correct, and you start to understand who are the kind of the customer cohorts that are coming here. Is it the early morning like mall walkers that are coming in and they're the ones sticking around and doing this? Is it people coming after school and browsing and doing this? And yes, you're trying to figure out who are the customers, when do they come, and how do we adjust the mall to kind of better serve that. So it'd be very intriguing if we could get there. But this example, we did not do that. So I'll jump to the next one here. This actually wasn't ours, so I can more openly speak about it. Opentable. Who here knows Opentable? Okay. So, how have you used it though? You've used it to make reservations, yes?
Yes.
Okay. You know what Opentable actually is. They're not a reservation company. It's actually not their business model at all. That's what I know. That's what I knew about them. Till one of our data strategists comes back and goes, you realize their actual value here. Opentable is the entire point of sale system for restaurants. So those who have been in the restaurant industry, you might know Opentable. So the host behind the booth, when they're seating you, they're using Opentable software. So if you can make a reservation at the restaurant with Opentable, that means Opentable is running the entire system. So with this is less data culture. This is a little bit more just think about data in different ways and data assets. So with Opentable, they were actually able to go ahead, and since they own the whole point of sale system for the restaurant, they also know your reservation, they also know who you are, because you registered with them. They know everything. So most of the time, a single restaurant, so you go to Morgan's Steakhouse for your anniversary dinner. That steakhouse would know who you are and that you came in. Flipped, right? They have one point of data. Opentable, since they're across multiple restaurants, multiple people, they know way more than that. They actually know which restaurants you went to, how many reservations you make, how many do you stick to, how many do you cancel, do you make multiples, do you back off, do you go out the same date every year, which they could then figure out, right, it's either birthday, it's anniversary. They know what you ordered. A little creepy. But they know what you ordered. They know how many drinks you had. I'm joking with Mike.
Yep.
Like they might start judging you.
I took the Uber home.
Think about how powerful it is, right? It's someone who to us is a free data vendor, or it's a free vendor. It's helping us do something that I want to do. I want to make a reservation. I don't want to make a phone call. I want to click, click, click. But they've actually forced themselves, and they've taken a traditional value chain, which is a very heavily fragmented restaurant industry, where data really doesn't mean that much. It's a restaurant. Who cares about data? Unless you're McDonald's, right, where you have so many restaurants and you can aggregate that data and you can actually start to do analysis on it. Most restaurants don't have that many different restaurants out there that can do that much analysis. Opentable says, well then I will be your analytics provider above all of that. So I'm just saying, change the thinking a little bit. Think about what data assets are truly out there. This is about connecting an industry that wasn't connected yet and being able to do something very different with it.
So is that your value added for putting Opentable in, or that's your value added to selling it as an upgrade to the service? How does that work in the distribution?
So I'd say it's a value add. I honestly guess I don't quite know how they charge.
Mm.
I assume they charge for their point of sale system.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming they also sell the customer analytics back.
Right.
I actually don't know that they do. I gotta assume that they do.
You think so? Yeah.
I
I would
have
think
to
so.
assume nowadays.
Probably, like a platinum, gold, silver kind of a thing.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So depending on what all you
That would make sense. And then you give the data back.
Yes. We give you back what you are.
Right,
giving us,
right.
Exactly.
They also collect a lot of data. They have another product arm that's specifically for concierges or hotel staff. I worked as a concierge, and they had concierge-facing software where we would put everything we knew about that customer when we were
Whoa.
making reservations for people. So I might put their name, their phone number, their email. I would describe if it was an anniversary, so then that data could be turned into like text-based data and processed that way.
Amazing.
So they also can get it from external sources besides the direct customer and restaurant themselves.
But they then could also feed that back to you. And now a customer coming in, you might even know that they're in for their anniversary. You might be able to greet them differently because you actually have some history about them. So
Yeah.
again, I'm not trying to play it as much as they're watching what you're doing. I'm more playing it as there's data everywhere, and there's just different ways to think about it and different values for it. So just very interesting.
Well, yeah, so what you're saying is the restaurants with the information, if I understand you, could possibly use it to either modify their catalog, otherwise known as a menu,
Yep.
or
Yep.
train their staff on the people side to engage the customer around who's coming in and what they're looking for.
You have to customize the experience.
Yeah.
Another one that we don't have documentation on, just to briefly share on, also related to the food industry, food distribution companies. This is a huge thing for them, where based on who their clients are, the restaurants, typically small, not McDonald's type chains, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't always know what the next trend thing is going to be, the next farm to table, the next whatever. So part of their value add as a distributor is to be able to go to those restaurants and say, you might want to look at this hot item in this category. We're seeing this in other Italian restaurants like yours across the country, kind of thing, or in your market, based on having similar demographics. So there's a lot of data insights that kind of organization is doing. And when you consider the margins, which are not great in food distribution, wherever you can kind of add that value, and therefore charge that premium or at least be able to sustain business, that's a huge thing.
That's huge.
Just a quick PSA, Chicago Restaurant Week is through February 9th.
Yeah, absolutely.
There you go.
Yes. So go to the restaurants. Use Opentable for
Book it via Opentable.
Love it. Awesome.
All right, so moving on here. So again, I feel like we tried to lay out why is it important. We laid out some companies who have used data in intriguing ways, but it's not just limited to those two. And so what we've created here is we believe a very successful, easy to follow framework of how to unlock the potential of the organizations that you're a part of. So 5 key elements to create it. And we're going to dig into each one of these. But in essence, you're trying to create, it's a culture change. Again, it's not a tech change, it's a culture change. And so, unfortunately or fortunately, I'm a data person. I always assume if I create the coolest looking dashboard in the world, everyone in the world's going to use it. Because it's just slick, it's fast, it tells such very cool insights. I spent hours doing machine learning, trying to pump out some amazing, interesting, predictive thought, and I'm like, deal. Look at this. No one uses it. Because that's not how people work. People want to believe in people take longer to come along than pure just technology innovation, right? It takes time. And so this is where Mike and I pair very well. And so Mike's like, well, hold on, it's not that easy. We actually need to have everyone come along for the ride, right? So what do we do first? Number one is create a bold vision. This is a lot about just creating the executive alignment. So when we've gone up before, when we've tried to do this, honestly, if you don't have the C-suite at a company screaming for this to change, it's very hard.
Right.
There can be little pockets where you can maybe run your department differently. But in essence, the culture of an organization doesn't really change. So unless you're creating from the ground up, you're a startup, you can start with a great data culture. It's one way to go. You're the Facebooks of the world, you can start with data culture at your core and kind of bring it up from there. Most companies, though, they started before all of this was super hot. They haven't thought about this. So what we found, you really need to kind of create this bold vision and get the alignment all the way up. And this bold vision is supposed to say, next time a report is brought, next time a decision is made, and an executive's in the room, they should be starting to push it away and say, I'm not listening until I have data to back up this decision. So no longer relying on hunches, no longer relying on an Excel report that someone pulled together. It's something that is actually certified, it's trusted, and it's validated. And they're bringing insights that they've actually captured and brought forward. But again, you need everyone in the organization trying to say this, and so that's why we say it needs to go all the way to the top. So once that bold vision is created, we move forward to say, well, to be able to bring that report to this meeting, to be able to go and find this insight that I want to share and teach you, I actually need access and transparency. Again, you can have all the technology in the world, but if I don't have access to actually query the data, what am I supposed to be able to do with this? So access and transparency is about making sure that A, the technology and the architecture is there, it's scalable to the number of users that you have, but the data is actually available to everyone. If you've read, was it Team of Teams? Has anyone read it? Yes, a few. It's an amazing book, by the way. It's about how they caught bin Laden and how they literally, even within the CIA, they open up data access and data transparency to everyone. Even the brand new analysts hired out of college had access to the most sensitive, top secret information, and that is the reason why we actually changed as that organization changed and were able to adapt faster. Because before that, we were like the British redcoats slowly marching down. We were like this super slow kind of government organization and couldn't figure out how to keep up with that side. And so we were trying to figure it out. Again, they just said if we give access to everyone, everyone becomes their own data analyst. They were finding people who were within a week or two of starting a company were actually finding insights and bringing them and changing behavior of how that entire organization was going to run. Very good book. But I digress. So coming back here, this is about making sure the right people have access to the right systems. This doesn't mean everyone gets access to everyone's social security number and everyone's salary. Obviously, there's limitations on what you should give access to. But in general, right, you're giving access to a majority of the information. There's really no reason to have silos. Data silos, when like one group within an organization has kind of access to their data, like marketing has access to marketing data, sales has sales data, and finance has finance data, and no one really works together. So a lot of this is about access and transparency. It also is about making sure that it's architected in a way that's actually brought together and unified, so that not every individual needs to do it. This is where IT comes in. IT needs to actually build a nice unified data model, enterprise data model that people can easily query. Jumping out of here, guardianship. This is our cute word that we created. Not really. But governance is really what this entails. Governance has kind of become a 4-letter word. Governance is about, sounds like red tape. Sounds a lot like you need to go ask permission for a lot of things to happen. Guardianship and about creating guardianship is about establishing trust in the data that you have. So when I go and actually pull our sales numbers for last month, are they legitimate? Are they correct? If I pull them from 3 different places, do they actually line up? So is the data quality good enough, and will it work? It's about adhering. We'll talk later about CCPA and GDPR. So does it actually handle the legal ramifications? So to talk about Opentable, now you can go to Opentable and say, delete my data and forget about me. And if you live in California, or if you act like you live in California, they should be able to wipe all your data for you. So there are reasons from both sides why now data needs to be governed in a way and centralized so that when you say go and delete my data, it's not stored in 50 different systems anymore. It needs to be able to understand where that is. So when a customer comes in and says delete me, you actually know where that is, and there's one central record that you can wipe out once and for all, and you can actually truly delete that customer information. So this gets down into ethical use of data, legal use of data, and making sure that you actually have kind of what we call the single source of truths, that you have of true master records, that the Kevin Chaplin user ID that's stored in the system is stored once and only once, and there's not 3 to 5 variations. Like at the DMV where I had to change my address, I think with 3 different counters. I went to this guy and I'm like, wait, why are you still sending my paperwork over here? They're like, well, you gotta go talk to that person too. So Illinois DMV apparently does not have a great master record for who I am, because it takes me 3 hours in the DMV to go through and change my address in 3 different systems. So this guardianship is about establishing trust in your data and your tools and in the practices that you have. And we're gonna dig a little bit deeper in all these. We're kind of giving a broad brush here.
Good. So from a literacy standpoint, so this is things like what the data competency and usage of that data. So people know what they're looking at, know how to use it, but again, what systems and tools that they might want to use for that situation. When is it right? Data usage and communication. When should you spend 5 or 10 minutes or an hour on something versus spending a day, right? What's the right amount of time that you should invest for whatever it is that you're trying to hypothesize and prove, right? What's that mindset? So thinking critically about the data and being a human about is this accurate? Is this right? Is this the right quality? And being critical about that and being critical about some of the conclusions that you might be drawing from that. And having those around you challenge you and being critical about that. And having the right culture that allows for that challenge, hopefully, but to have that challenge. And then from a data culture standpoint, using culture word a lot, I know, but from a culture standpoint, that this is part of your overall business strategy, that this is not something that this goes into every important decision that you're making, the use of the data, and that you don't make those decisions just from the gut. So when we think about from a data literacy standpoint, those are some of the major components that come out of that. And ultimately, as it says here, that you're empowered to uncover those insights, ask the questions, think critically, and challenge those conclusions. So having the license to do so, having leadership that supports that, and giving kind of that open free rein to do so. Ways of working, the visual is intended to kind of encapsulate what everything else that's here. Ways of working is probably some consulting buzzwords here. I'll try not to too much, but it's things like what's your operating model? How does one group work with one another on a day-to-day basis? What's your organizational structure? Who reports to whom, both officially and unofficially? It's the talent. Do you have the right talent sets, skill sets to be able to do this? Do you need to look? What is your talent strategy if you don't? Is it build? Is it buy? Is it both? Something else? Is it outsourced? Incentives and behaviors. Now, part of that's compensation, yes, but part of that again is that leadership modeling and the behaviors that are showing that this is what we encourage, this is what we reward in a non-monetary sense. Having the right modern tools and analytics, so the overall, if it is a Tableau, for example, if it's an Alteryx, whatever the right platforms are that are modern, user-friendly, easy to use, and allow for that democratization of data and the usage of it. And then last, you can still have all these things, but do you have it built into your operations? If you are an organization that has your standard operating procedures, for example, have you been thoughtful about that in the use of data and the use of everything we're talking about here as part of those processes? And that's sometimes an afterthought. Sometimes, as Kevin's mentioned, potentially newer organizations or greenfield environments, that's part of the MO going in. So a lot of what we see is organizations that are trying to retrofit for this a little bit. And that makes it really interesting and a lot of different techniques and ways that you have to kind of look at doing that. So this is kind of where we kind of break it down as best we can into some of what we've already been talking about, and really kind of a one-slider if you were to think about it. Starting from the left-hand side, it is starting with the why. If you don't have that why, at some point you're going to have a point of contention or a series of point of contentions. If you're not anchoring back to what that vision is, if everybody in the room, when you have that first critical moment of having data-driven decision-making, you're not anchoring back to that why, what that strategy is, it's going to fall apart. It might not fall apart that first time, but it will fall apart. So having that, anchoring against that, refreshing that, and making sure that the organization uses that, leverages that. Ways of working, already drained a little bit of this, but again, kind of operating model, how everyone works together. I'll highlight a little bit kind of on the bottom side there, enabling self-service and intake and demand, right? So these are things like, for example, in that partnership between IT and business, for example, the business might ask a lot of questions. They might want a lot of different things, but what's most important to them? How do you prioritize what those requests are that are coming in that are going to be the highest value, and therefore the things that should probably be worked on first?
So kind of what I'd say is the old school companies are still having IT creating the insights. IT is creating reports. They're pushing them out. They're very governed. If you ask for a report, it takes 2 or 3 months to get a new report out. The complete opposite of that is what self-service is about. Allowing the end user the access, the tools to go and do it themselves. And in 30 minutes, you can throw a Tableau dashboard together that answers the question. In fact, we found most Tableau dashboards have a lifespan of about an hour. Most reports are to find the insight, and that insight next week doesn't really mean much because you've already changed. Your business has changed. You've actually adapted. There are some enterprise reports. How many widgets did we sell last month, right? How are things trending? Where are we going? What new market should we enter? Fine. There are going to be reports that do have longer lifespans than that, but the majority of dashboards have very, very short lifespans. In fact, the audience of most dashboard is one person. It's you. You're doing analysis with that dashboard. So it's more data analysis that's being done with self-service as opposed to creating these massive enterprise dashboards, which still get done, but at a much, much smaller level. So instead of the business coming and asking IT to create kind of every little insight that they want to see, you're able to answer most of the questions yourself. And after you answer your questions, then of course you have follow-up questions, and you're able to kind of go down the rabbit hole. But what's happening is a lot fewer things are bubbling all the way up then to IT. So it's nice. It actually thins out the amount of work that IT gets to work on, They're not responsible to do, it's called business intelligence, so they're pushing IT to do a lot more of the data and the data preparation.
And just to briefly tie that back to the success metrics for the first column, one of the ways that you're going to be able to tell that an organization will be able to tell them that intake and demand is what is the valuable things? How can we all agree on what the important things are at even a high level, so that when those individual requests do come in, you are able to do that prioritization.
And in kind of a situation where maybe I'm your data scientist and
Yeah.
you're the business arm of my company, and you mostly know what you need out of insights, but you don't know how to ask for it in a quantifiable way that I'll understand, and I maybe don't have a business background to understand your needs. Have you seen any really good methods of questioning or really good questions that stood out to you from the data side that work well to uncover needs from the business side? Like if I don't know my business very well, how can I most effectively uncover your needs in a way that is easy for you to communicate, but also easy for me to understand in a technical way?
Yeah, it's a good one. I don't know that I have a stock set of like a question set that we start with. There's a little bit where we see work structurally, for example. For example, if you are a data scientist, basically assigning or timing you to a portion of the business. So you might, for example, work with merchandising and sales, and you become kind of their liaison. So you're more partnering with them. So structurally, thinking about it through.
Compartmentalizing.
Exactly, kind of groups are doing that. But being mindful that that data scientist probably doesn't want to do that for their whole life or their full career. So being thoughtful about how you would be rotational about that to kind of build those skill sets along the way.
Absolutely. Showing them what you've already uncovered, you've already built. I'm business in your example, I think. So if I've already uncovered some insights, I've started to dig into it. I know what data sources I've connected to. I know what insights I've seen. Something's trending down. I can now point to that. The data scientist can go right to them. I mean, a good data scientist can do great things with data. A great data scientist can tell the story of what they found, right? And can kind of bridge that gap between data and between business. In your example, though, right, if that gap or that chasm still exists, I say the closer that you can talk data to that data scientist, I feel like they're going to understand you. So you go and you show the insights that you found. You're going to show, hey, this metric's been falling off. Can you help me understand why? Right? Then they now have exactly what their output is, and they're trying to figure out now what are the biggest feature sets that are going to basically attack that number, and why is that trending downwards? And they're going to then take that out and say, did you know it actually has battery sales increase when hurricanes are coming? And they're going to find some weird correlation that you never knew existed. But you're going to say, like, why do they always fall off after this? Or why was this increasing here? And they're going to go and say, well, give me all the data that we have access to. I'm going to look at you the one KPI that you're trying to track and try to figure out what I've seen that correlates well to.
Okay, or I might do some like exploratory data analysis and bring them like a few different things that I noticed and say, these are 3 things that I noticed, but I don't understand the context. Does this matter to you?
Yeah.
And then
Why,
they
how are
can
these
say yes,
related?
and we can dive into it, or they can say no, and I can throw it out.
And a lot of it, it's expectation setting on that partnership, right? That this is going to be exploratory for both groups in terms of, as I'm learning, in your example, as you're learning the business and as they're learning what is possible, that there's some level of kind of patience and kind of partnership so that you are ultimately arriving at that and building those expectations in. And what are the roles and responsibilities that a data scientist should have? How important is the organization put in on it that they're not just a data scientist, but that they are encouraged and equipped to learn business, and on the business side to not be a data scientist necessarily, but be able to understand enough to be able to start to ask the smart questions.
As a data scientist, being on the other side of that, when I talk to internal clients, and I walk in and I say, "What's going on?" And they're like, "Oh, I need blah 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 blah." And I'm like, "Well, wait a minute, back up. What are you trying to accomplish with this?"
Yep. Talk about the why.
Yeah. And so, talk to them about what you're trying to accomplish, what the problem is you're trying to solve for. And then they should be able to start grasping from that, what you need, what they need to do to dig into it and get to it. It may be a machine learning algorithm, it may be a specific type of machine learning algorithm, or it may be something something entirely different that, you look through and sort of think through. That you can create, so you can think through and find the answer you're looking for. It just sort of depends, on what you're looking for.
Thank you. Becky, yeah, please.
From an organizational structure perspective, where do you feel this belongs? Because you can make an argument that belongs in marketing and IT and merch and depending on the organization, but it's an organizational structure. That's one question. And then question two, who do you feel should be the champion of this in your organization?
It's a great question. So I would, the first piece, right? If you're talking culture, culture should be everywhere, right? That's supposed to be pervasive across the entire organization. I think understanding maybe where should self-service come from, who should be enabling that, who should be the champion of the culture change that would come forward. Honestly, we've seen it and we've been trying to brainstorm it. Who are the right folks to talk to? A lot of times, the past couple conversations that we've had is more from like a chief data officer, someone who's kind of in this middle ground between the two. We've had a few clients come to us and they're like, hey, what am I supposed to be responsible for as a chief data officer? What should I be doing? What should I be responsible for? And like, this is perfect, right? This is what we frame up your responsibilities as. This is how we likely kind of, then we go through and we say, kind of measure yourself on all of these things. What do you already have? What's defined? What are you weak on? And then we would say, okay, well, this one probably needs to go a little bit better. You have really strong tools and technology, but your data quality is very low. How do we go ahead and build trust by increasing the data quality that you have? And once you have that, if we give access to everyone, it'll take off, type of thing. But I've seen more coming from kind of the hybrid data route, and what they're trying to do is kind of rebuild the relationship between business and IT.
Yeah.
In a general sense, but honestly, it can be anywhere. I mean, anyone who's challenged to basically create like a business relationship manager in kind of that organization. So it's usually on like this hybrid team that's supposed to be between IT and business. Is the best place for that to start. Now, if that doesn't exist, and there truly is just IT and there's business, then I'd say it's who's ever your most. It's probably who's ever the most data-centric business unit, which is usually like the marketing arm.
I was gonna say, marketing is the other place where we're seeing
Makes a lot of sense.
demand from the business side for this. It's typically marketing because they've seen what can happen, what can be done.
They have a ton of data.
Yeah.
They have a lot of value if they can produce something with that data. And they usually have a lot of funds to make change. All three of those are perfect.
And that last point is an important one in terms of the funds, because let's be honest in terms of where the project money is usually coming from. It's coming from those that are making the money, business. So yeah, so you have to. That's why having something like this where it can hit both sides and have the value of both sides is so important.
But you've seen a hybrid solution too, also.
Yeah. With the right setup going in, the right expectations, senior leadership reinforcing that
That's right.
again and again and again.
When we did ours together, our project together, it was specifically the CEO screaming it. Like we need to change, and this is we need self-service and we need it now. And every meeting he was in, he was kind of restating that.
Yeah.
Guess what? People line up to be like, oh, I'm willing, I'm on board too. Like, let's go do it together. And so I feel a little bit that's why you need that bold vision. You need the executive sponsorship, and then at that point, business and IT kind of show up holding hands.
Yeah.
Whereas other times they might just, based on old relationships, have they kind of struggle through that.
Yeah.
So I know we're getting close to time. I want to make sure we leave time for questions. So anything else want to come here?
No, let's keep moving on.
All right, so we had kind of general questions of what we were hearing. I feel like we've hit a lot of these. So these are overall different pieces. We talked a little about the regulatory compliance, like how do you actually get value out of that? This is it's hitting, right? January 1st, TCPA came into effect, which means that customers now control their own privacy data, which is actually very exciting. Talking about a single source of truth, do we have a global data office, and what are they responsible for, and how do we upskill our organization to make sure that they're data literate? We started talking about, these were some of the recent conversations that we've
To
had.
your point about where this is.
Who are we talking to? Who's coming in and asking for this? So the DVP of Business Analytics and Information Management. This out of retail side, I was the senior director of data and analytics who was responsible for the migration. Right now migrating to Azure, and they said, hey, while we're making this migration to Azure, we're also pulling in Power BI. We also need to go and reform the relationship with the business. How do we go ahead and do this? So we then get to say, okay, well, this is how we approach it. This is how we do it. But again, it's starting. I feel like it's the bold question. But we were 15 minutes into the conversation. I go, this is the person who's actually. I've been trying. I don't want to get too deep. But with this client, I've been trying for about 5 years to start some kind of change, and I finally talked to the right person. And from Mike's point of view, I go, oh my God, this is the change champion. This is the person I've been waiting for. Because that you can tell they kind of have they got a little bit of fire to them. They're willing to disrupt. They're willing to kind of go against the grain, and they're asking the right questions. And I go, okay, it's actually going to happen now. We can help bring it back. I'm going to pause. So thank you very much. Q&A, we'll open it up. We can stay as long as you want. If you got to run, please feel free to run. Otherwise, we'll take questions. And I will also, we have a whole appendix. We can jump 1,000 different places. So choose your own adventure.
What if you don't have the right data?
So don't have the right data or bad data? It's all
You
you
don't have the right data. Make those predictions.
I love it. All right. So,
What was the question?
what if you don't have the right data? Was the question. Honestly, it's, even knowing that you don't have the right data is a great step. What I'd say is either there's third-party data vendors and you can go out and actually acquire it. The other thing is I'd say what kind of data are you looking for? There's a lot of times where there's a lot of data that you might have access to that you're not capturing yet. So whether or not it's clickstream data and you don't have all of the right trackers on the website to understand how far people are getting down the funnel, pieces like that. So I'd say, can you create the data?
Can you, as their vendor, encourage them to create these new collection data points?
Can you as a vendor?
It's you. That's
Oh, it's me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of, so far left over there, where we're talking about kind of value case and success metrics. Yes, that's where you can kind of start to get into you need to make that investment to collect that third party or whatever this is and start to build that ROI. Ways to model that.
Now, what I'd say is, we haven't run into many who I would say are completely saying, I don't have access to the right data. It's more of, I've been capturing data. Sorry, that's a general use case. I haven't heard that as much as I've heard, I've been collecting data for 20 years and it's sitting in a data lake now, and I don't know what to do with it.
I have all this data.
I have everything.
Yeah.
So I feel like companies have defaulted almost the opposite way, where they've just been collecting, but it's not organized, it's not thought about, they don't really know what it is, they don't know if it has value.
Right.
And they're going, yeah, someday someone's going to figure that out. It's like, now is the time. But what happened is you never had enough with your 15-person IT team or your 200-person IT team. You never had enough time and energy to actually dig into that because you didn't know where the nuggets were, the nuggets of gold, right? And so by opening up and allowing your 1,000-person organization where anyone can go dig in, your data scientist has access now to 10, 20 years of trending history, you actually can start to find really interesting things. The trouble if you don't have the data and you're just starting to collect it is you actually don't have enough to do much with until some time goes by and you're actually collecting for long enough. So it actually is it's a bad spot to be unless you can then attach it.
Well, I
You can take the data that you have attached to a third party and
I would wonder if that's not true of every single client. They don't have the right data. They might have a lot of data, but there's still data they need to get, and your job is to find out and help them discover what data they still need to find. Make these decisions, and that problem never stops.
it's about going to that why. So what is the why? What are you truly trying to solve? So what's the business problem? And then attach it to, are there KPIs that we need to track? Are there things that we want to predict? And then from there, what are you looking for?
Yeah, what data does the competition have that they don't have?
Correct.
They need to get to compete.
I'm sure they don't know that. That's the fun. They all get to theorize, right? And then we get to sit and pontificate about what might actually be.
But it is something that we're definitely exploring. We are exploring more so in terms of some of the industry trends towards what you're talking about, where there might be some of those data sets or ways to think about doing that, to be able to benchmark some of that and be able to kind of share that in a ethical way.
Right, I mean, and it's probably not something you could do, but if you have two clients that are in similar industries,
Yeah.
and there's a co-opetition data sharing kind of thing you can do, like Cisco and
You know, there's that, but what we've actually seen though is where you can get organizations that are not even closely related in the industry, because then you don't run into that same problem, and they're able to kind of share, well, if we had this similar problem, this is how we attack it. And that's something we've actually found a great deal of value over the recent years in connecting our clients that are not in the competition space, so that we can facilitate them sharing notes basically. So, yeah.
As an example, like I worked for a startup company which was in industrial IoT, right? So we were doing motors and engines. And so, for example, they had a lot of data on, let's say, vibration and temperature, but they were missing the data on the noise and acoustics and something else. That we, as an industry experts, we knew that that would be important. So one of the things we did, we obviously started gathering the right data. Sensors, and then after some data is being gathered,
Yep.
you can correlate and model back missing data so you can find kind of a projection backwards. So
I like the example. So just repeating it.
Curious on that.
Industrial IoT found out they were tracking two different things. What is vibration and temperature, but wasn't tracking sound, and so we had to install sensors to go ahead and actually pick up additional sound so that you could correlate all three of those together and try to.
And then he said model backwards, very interesting, and then model backwards. Yeah, from essentially, yeah.
I'm curious, how long did you give yourself on that to collect that before you started to try it, and then before you found you had what you
about
needed?
6 months.
6 months. Okay.
Question, centralized versus distributed automation model, which one worked, we have an example of which one works in what setting?
Yeah. So, frankly,
Describe it first.
yeah. So first of all, centralized is where everything is kind of in that centralized, right? It's everyone is think of your kind of a major company where they've got headquarters and everything's kind of emanates from there. For example, in terms of from a delivery standpoint.
That's the traditional IT model where I said that they might have a centralized
wall.
BI arm. You go and ask them, you put in your request, you get it. I'm not trying to say obviously they're speeding up, they're getting better. Centralized is where most people have started.
Distributed goes the other extreme of that, which is literally you've got analysts everywhere. They may or may not be coming to the same conclusions, but it's problematic. It can be used, but depending on the size of the organization, it gets pretty problematic pretty quickly. Where frankly, where we end up, or where we see most organizations, it's hybrid, right? Because it's where on that spectrum you are between centralized and decentralized. In some cases, we've actually seen where they have the hybrid, but they allow a little bit longer leash for some groups over others based on whether that's because, whether it's whether they, exactly, maturity, if they've got the right folks in-house, if they've got the right partnerships with data scientists within the organization. So from an example standpoint,
But I mean, the hybrid, in essence, it's a distributed model. You still have your resources out here embedded within each business unit doing your thing.
Yeah.
Your question before of like, what if the data scientist doesn't understand what I'm trying to do? That's why this works so well, because they're embedded with you. At least the data analyst, the data scientist might be skilled up enough where they actually are their separate team. So what we've seen more is you kind of do data analysis down here, you do kind of your first level, and then eventually there's actually more of a centralized data science team. These are very specific skill sets. They're expensive. And so you build kind of a specialized team out here to do the deep analytics. What you have here though is this centralized center of excellence or user groups, and all these people defining kind of standards, defining what your template should look like, defining the data that you should have access to, defining even which tools they should have. A lot of things that we talked about here, who's responsible to actually build that thought process and to help make sure that people adhere to it? It's going to be this centralized body. So a lot of times when they're nice enough to bring us in, we kind of act as this, right? We come out, we start throwing out a bunch of orders. This is how you work. In essence, though, we're only there for a couple weeks, maybe months, and then we leave. We need to make sure that this is an arm that's actually created. So usually there's a steering committee, which is the executives to make sure that like a few person team, and then there's a center of excellence, there's community of practice, a few different cute names that run with it. But those are the team members that are actually defining those standards to say these users should have access to this. The data quality here is good enough that we can start to actually allow people to become it.
It's adoption.
it is.
Yeah.
And the gotchas and the caveats that you run into with the centers of excellence and communities of practice, whatever word you want to use for that, is you're usually not creating a brand new job. when you're doing this. You're asking somebody to do something else because they're the expert in that area. So you have to be very careful in that additional 5, 10, 20% or whatever that looks like for their role to do that, and make sure that their management, their team understands what else is being asked of them, and you have the support to be able to do that. So it's not just this one other thing. And we've seen cases of this where great momentum, great things going, we check back in, try to make sure it's sustained, it's going well, and all of a sudden it's, well, John Smith didn't want to do that, and so now we don't have anybody in merchandising who's helping us with community practice. And so that's something you have to be very watchful for and make sure that you're doing it.
Mike, just adding on to what you were trying to say, how do you actually empower a business user to perform these operations, much like data science, which they may not be knowing? How do you suggest a business person to analyze data sets and come
Well, how do you have them learn? Is that what you're kind of okay,
not just
great.
learn,
Yeah.
you said that it should be distributed instead of centralized. So how does other people who don't know so much of data science use it?
Yeah. Depending on the level of investment that the organization is going to you try to help them get towards some of that data literacy. So, and if this is something where, as that business user, there needs to be that motivation for them to want to do that. You can encourage them, but at the end of the day, they need to have that motivation for it.
I'd say data science is probably too deep of a skill set to be teaching. I mean, it's something
But
that's user experience, that's education. That's more than hey, I went to a one-on-one class and I'm now a data scientist.
Yeah.
I would assume you've done more than that.
Yes.
All right.
Already stated Holiday Express, I'm not sure.
So what I'd say is more trying to teach data analysis skills, which I would put differently. So that's the ability to write SQL, right? Blend some data together, actually understand, right, the different tables that you're pulling from, able to write very complex SQL, pulling it back and actually understanding what's happening and why would you be getting duplication in your row counts and all of these things, and truly understanding that, and then being able to take that and say, I analyze the information and I got something out of it, kind of garnering insights. That is what I would be teaching the business. Now, what I'm trying to do, I'm not trying to create data scientists out of business users. I'm trying to create, I call them super users. So it's trying to create kind of super business users that are dangerous enough inside of data that they are comfortable querying it, comfortable touching it, comfortable querying it, and massaging it. And that's about it, that level of depth that we typically would recommend most business users getting to. I'm not trying to limit them from going beyond that, but that's what I'd say is a training curriculum. I would be trying to get them to that level. I'm not trying to make them the next data engineer and the next data scientist. Because that's a more specialized skill set.
And the great thing is many organizations, we call them shadow analysts, right? Especially in that decentralized model, shadow IT, shadow analysts, where harness that, use that.
They're already trying to do it.
They're already trying to do it. You might as well bring them on in to empower them to actually do that. Yes.
Have you ever seen a situation where you found a good some prediction out of data, and you already know from data science that there's only some amount of confidence in that prediction, let's say 95% of confidence, and you both the business and the IT teams feel that this is a good prediction, and in the end it tanks. I mean, it just doesn't. It's not common sense, and people don't see. I mean, how good is actually banking on just data?
It tanks why? Like it tanks because that was actually the wrong prediction, or it tanks because no one bought into that and the business actually didn't change?
Have you seen that happen?
Wait, I would say it tanks because the customer really wasn't fully understood.
Correct. I'd say
That's
that
probably
you're
what
actually
happened.
missing information.
Yeah,
Or
there's an inference.
Or you pick something that was, a correlation, not causation. You found something that you thought was intriguing.
Yes.
That's a bad model, and you need to go back and rethink and try again. It happens. This is a lot of times why I don't think I'd ever completely change and upright our ship and try to change this way purely based on one model that was written. I feel like you're going to hypothesize, you're going to roll out to a single one of your markets, one region. You're going to try something different and see, did this actually hold true? And it's one of those, I know you mentioned fail fast culture. This is about trying it. If it doesn't work, you go, whoop, something was wrong there, and either we have bad data, we're missing data, we made the wrong assumptions, we I mean, there's 1,000 reasons why things can
Yeah, you get it to the customer
go
fast.
corrupt.
Yeah.
But you tried it, it didn't work. Okay. But if it only wasted a week, fine, go try it again. Try something else, and then when that does work and you're able to prove that there's value there, then you like double down and you go all in. But I
It's
don't.
also a matter of not falling so in love with your hypothesis that you're ignoring that everything around it might be telling you there's something wrong.
Right.
So getting back to thinking critically and sometimes having those challenger mentality type folks that you reward for having that. Not being obstinate or a jerk about it, doing that, but then thinking critically enough. Have you really thought through this, even if you have that, 95% plus confidence?
It's in the back.
Back to the absolute basics, right? How do you teach somebody basic analysis, finding insights, and in a data illiterate culture or company
I would challenge that no one's data illiterate, actually, at this point.
Yeah, I would say
Good,
that's true.
good.
I would
Good point.
name, I don't know, who in here can use Excel?
Exactly.
Right? I mean, right?
Yeah.
Maybe not me.
Nice.
No, wait, I work with people, right, that take an Excel spreadsheet, put a column of numbers in, then they get out the calculator and add it all up and put that.
Oh, maybe they're not Excel power users. What I'm challenging though is that I get the question. I mean, you go back 20 years and you throw someone a smartphone, they probably wouldn't be able to do it either. It's 2020. Most people have, I guess, theoretically understand the concept of what data is. Get the concept that you can sum columns, that you can multiply columns. What I think is missing are some core data concepts, especially when you're talking about unioning multiple different data sets and why things can go awry and why they pair up and what a unique identifier is. I feel like are the concepts that I'd center in on, and that's actually why I center a lot on when I would teach data literacy. Is less of SQL syntax that I want to teach. It's more of I teach a lot of SQL skills specifically so that people understand how data truly stitches together.
I would add to that real data, real use cases, in a real scenario, so that if you are that end user, it's real to you, right?
Yeah.
One of the mistakes that we made early on as we were trying to do some of the, kind of mentioned self-service business intelligence and democratization of that, and kind of rolling that out, is we relied too heavily on stock tableau trainings, basically. Yeah, and it means nothing to an end user
Right.
because it's a mock set of data. It's not real. But if they start to see, oh, this is the unit cases that we shipped last week or whatever business that you're in, and you're able to make that real for them, that's one of the best ways that we've seen.
And they're to smell something's wrong, right? If they go and say, we shipped 1 million cases last week, they go, no, I screwed up something, right? And I feel like, again, they have that context to kind of look and feel. But I agree. It's not easy. It's not an hour-long class. I mean, it is something where you are, a lot are coming out of school with the knowledge already, right? So I feel like it's being taught, SQL's being taught, Tableau's being taught, Python's being taught in a variety of classes now. And there's that aspect along with just people who have been utilizing Excel for the longest time, and they can. Most people who can use Excel, I haven't heard of many who don't know the sum function, but at least I feel like some will default to charts, some are going to default to pivot tables. I'm okay with that. That means that they truly understand what they're looking for. They just don't have they don't understand the right tools that they should be using. There's tools that are better than Excel.
Yeah.
And so now, it's great. I'm taking the Excel knowledge that they have, and I'm trying to pivot that to say, there's better things on the market. If your company will splurge for a Power BI license, like keep hitting Alteryx. If you hit an Alteryx license, Alteryx is phenomenal, by the way, for those who haven't used it. Very nice, very easy to understand. It's very graphically oriented and all of that. So I think we're going to get cut off here pretty soon.
One more question, then we can hang out afterwards, so I know
Cool.
people are getting antsy.
Got it.
One more question.
Okay.
How do you teach the leadership how to lead with data and analytics?
So there's two things that we've seen. Is one, I basically tell them no longer to trust information that doesn't have data backing it up. And what we actually talk about secondarily, because I can make an Excel chart that'll tell you anything that I want to tell you. So then we actually fall back. So what we don't want is people producing fake data, fake insights. And so we actually have a secondary thing where I say that it's fine to share information internally between me, between my department. The minute I'm sharing with someone who doesn't know who the author of that report is, I ask for it to be certified. So instead of governing and forcing people to walk down some red tape before you can go and create a report, what I say is create any report you want, but before you share it with anyone, I'm going to make sure that it's certified and that the basically the outputs, the KPIs, the insights that you found have been certified by a third party. And so it's helping to make sure. So now, an executive, you go and show them a report. It's a certified report. You found some insight. They now can kind of trust it. So it's kind of like levels of trust with the output. But again, they need to be coaching them to say, don't take someone by a hunch. Don't say this is what we did last year. I think we're going to increase by 20% again. Show me why has that worked for you and how. And they should become challengers and say, bring me more, bring me the information, and how do you make this decision.
And don't let them get away with just using their gut. I know it's hard, very easy to say, hard to do it, right? But when everybody notices when the boss is deviating from, is not modeling behavior that they're encouraging. So you catch them in the act, basically. And part of our jobs is we're there for them. You know you're not doing